You're listening to the Entrepreneur Ignited podcast, where we aim to simplify online business so you can make more money. Now, here's your host, Derek Gehl.
Welcome to the Entrepreneur Ignited podcast. This is your host, Derek Gehl, and today we're going to be covering a topic and interviewing an expert in an area that I am extremely passionate about because it's an area that really changed how I do business, and frankly, I believe it's the future of business, particularly digital business and the sort of whole online lifestyle. And so what I'm talking about here is outsourcing. And our guest today is a gentleman that has not only mastered the outsourcing process for himself, but he mastered it so well now he's doing it for people all over the world and allowing people and businesses to leverage incredible talent at the fraction of a cost it would typically be to hire somebody internally and do incredible things. So I'd like to introduce our guest today, Monty Hooke. Monty, thanks very, very much for being here.
Thank you very much for having me, Derek. Awesome to be here and connect with all your crowd.
Fantastic. Now, okay, so you're an Aussie. You're from originally Brisbane, is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. I hope you can understand my Australian accent.
Oh, I've spent so much time in Australia, I translate it well. So we're good. We're good. So give us your story, right? I always like to start with the story. You know, where did you come from? How did you go from a guy in Brisbane to now, managing and running and owning these giant outsourcing organizations, helping people around the world outsource their businesses? How did this happen?
Yeah. So I'm an entrepreneur through and through. I had my first business when I was 8 years old. So I actually grew up on a boat in Sydney Harbour, and most people might assume that that's I lived on a boat because we had money or it was luxury. But the way I explain it, was it's kind of like a trailer on water, right? And so I just from a young age I was just a hustler, and I just kind of figured out that if I wanted something more for myself, it was up to me. Like nothing was ever going to be given to me on a silver platter. And so at 8 years old, I started this business cleaning boats in Sydney Harbour, and it was tough. But it was the thing that planted the seed for me, and ever since then, I've always took it upon myself to, I guess I've been a hustler. I've always been making money through my teenage years and through my 20s. I had a bunch of different businesses, and most of them failed, and most of them I was doing everything wrong. And I'll talk about some of those things that the mistakes I made. But it was just having always been in business, and then in 2008, I had a business in the auto parts industry, and that fell apart with the what's now known as the global financial crisis, and I ended up about $100,000 in the hole. I got off lightly compared to some people, but I was doing really quite well in the business, and next minute I was $100,000 in the hole, and it was from that point that I really wanted to. There was no question I wanted to continue in business, and but I wanted to figure out, what was the secret, what was the formula for really making it work, and what was missing. And I just became fascinated with leverage and people like Richard Branson, and I just studied my ass off. And from that point I started doing business coaching and mentoring and consulting in some form. And I just loved being an entrepreneur, and I loved helping other entrepreneurs. And it was, through that experience that I just became more and more fascinated with leverage. And through that, I started outsourcing myself and using virtual assistants. And I honestly didn't like what I found out there in the market. Most of it was what I now call do it yourself. That's where, you get connected with a freelancer and then you're left to your own devices. And it didn't work for me because I wasn't an expert in outsourcing, and I really had to figure it all out myself. I tried 26 different companies or 26 or different solutions that were out there in the market. And I eventually just said, screw this, I don't like anything that's out there. And I set up my own system, which is now known as ezyVA. And so it really just evolved out of a need for myself because I saw a gap in the market. And then as soon as I launched what is ezyVA, people started putting their hand up, and it just kind of grew from there. And, 3 years on, We've got a few hundred staff out of the Philippines and clients all around the world. Head office in Australia, a few offices in the Philippines, and I get to hang out here in Bali, and my whole philosophy is, and what I'm passionate about is helping entrepreneurs to grow a business that doesn't rely on them being there and allows them to be where they want to be. And most importantly, allows them to spend their time doing what they love, like doing the things that they're passionate about and what they're gifted with.
And I mean, that resonates. Obviously, it resonates with me. I think that resonates with so many people in this day and age. And, people don't know what they don't know right now. And, you just published a book, correct?
Correct, yeah. So Business Hacker, it's called. Mindset and Tools for the Successful Modern Entrepreneur. So I go into a lot of detail about the specifics of really making offshore outsourcing and working with virtual assistants work, but also the mindset behind it. What are the things that you really need to think about and prepare for, and how the systems in your business and that kind of thing.
And, it's funny, and the reason I want to go down that road is because I think mindset is key. Because if you don't have the right mindset going into the whole digital business, the outsourcing, that model, it's very easy to get led astray and to have bad experience after bad experience and assume that this doesn't work and give up. And so I've seen you speak, and the message you have is so powerful, and that's why I wanted to get you on our show here today. And so what I'd like to do now is kind of dig into this whole outsourcing your life, outsourcing your business thing, and talk about, why people are successful at it, why people aren't successful at it. And now the very first question I want to throw to you, though, is, why the Philippines? There's all these different countries. Why did you choose the Philippines?
Yeah, good question. So, the Philippines has really only become really big, probably in the last 10 years, but in the last 5 years especially. I don't know what it was like in Canada, but in Australia 10 years ago, all the big companies or the big corporations had their call centers out of India.
Yeah.
And then it all changed to the Philippines. And the reason for that is because, just a different culture between the countries. And Philippines, they have a softer nature about them, and they're just better at customer service related things. Mm-hmm. And that was kind of what gave the Philippines its kickstart, I guess, and helped it take over India in some regards. So India is still really great for more technical based things. But the Philippines really established itself, and then the Philippines, they all speak English over there, so they grow up in school, learning to speak English, and they're quite educated. They're good hard workers. The government over there, they're doing a lot of hard work, with the infrastructure in the country to really grow what is called the BPO, or business process outsourcing industry. There's a lot of international companies, growing their businesses there and putting offshore offices there. So, and this year, Philippines was the second fastest growing economy in the world. So, there's a number of reasons why Philippines is a good place to be, especially right now. But in terms of the work and getting the work done, because they speak English so well, that's probably the biggest advantage. They're much easier to communicate with, and they've got a good attitude in terms of learning. It's just they've got a culture over there of wanting to do a good job for people, and that's why I've established over there. And it doesn't work all the time, of course, but it's probably like anywhere. But I found Philippines for myself to be the best place, and that's why I wanted to pursue that more and more.
Yeah, and I mean, I would echo that. Of all the countries I've outsourced to, the Philippines is by far, I find, the easiest culturally to work with, and not only, and one of the things I think for people to understand as well, when we say that English is spoken very well there, there's lots of people in India that speak English, but there's just I guess you could say Western English is spoken very, very well in the Philippines.
Yeah, that's true. And the crazy thing is, and this is one thing that I always point out when I speak, is that wherever we speak English, whether it be Australia, Canada, USA, Philippines, every country, they have their own version of English, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
and the Philippines, they actually learn a very traditional type of English, and they actually speak better English than us in Australia. I don't want to comment on Canada, but and from wherever we're from, if we speak English, we tend to be quite arrogant about the way that we think we speak,
Yeah.
and the way that people should understand us. It's like, well, if I'm going to speak English, then you should understand me. But and that's one of the things to be mindful of is how you speak English, and have respect for articulating what you want properly. But in the Philippines, they speak a very traditional kind of English. So they and their accents are probably more lean towards North America.
Yes.
So in terms of understanding them and trying to get a result, if something if the communication breaks down, it seems to be just a lot easier out of the Philippines.
Now, beyond language, when somebody's outsourcing to the Philippines, what others are there any other sort of cultural barriers or things that would trip up, say, somebody from North America or Australia that have, we in Australia, North America, UK, we all do business in very similar ways, right? So we're quite interchangeable, right? Now, going into the Philippines and outsourcing there, what are some of the obstacles people may run into culturally, communication-wise, beyond language?
Yeah, so it's a great point, and one of the huge things is that the culture in Asia, it's pretty general in Asia, but definitely in the Philippines, is that if somebody is presented with a challenge over there, then it's kind of their culture that they bury their head in the sand. Like in Australia, it's just kind of expected if something happens, you speak up about it, you resolve the problem. In the Philippines, it can be very difficult to work with people there because they bury their head in the sand if something happens. So the smallest, tiniest little communication issue can happen. And I've seen like the smallest things can make it so that, somebody, doesn't raise an issue. And then, next thing you know, you've got this deadline in place, and, you're trying to launch this website, on Tuesday or whatever it is. And the next thing you know about the issues is on launch day because they haven't spoken up about something, and that's their culture, right? So that can be definitely worked around if you work with people who know what they're doing. That's probably one thing, but it's just to be mindful of nurturing them. And what I always say is have the mindset or have the structure of bringing them in as part of your team, because if you kind of have this attitude of, all right, I'm in North America and they're in the Philippines and they're just completely separate. If you kind of view them as separate and not part of your business, then they're not going to feel they're not going to trust you enough to be able to speak up. So when it comes to working with people in the Philippines, I really believe in creating a long-term view, having a long-term structure, and creating a long-term relationship. And then once they get up to speed with you, they'll go to the end of the earth for you. But it does take some time for them to trust you. Mm-hmm. So that's probably the biggest thing that I see happen. And we can be a little bit, if we're really impatient, and we want a result yesterday, and we don't have that patience to allow a little bit of teething. Then that's when it all sort of starts to fall over and the communication breaks down, and they don't speak up about something, and then you're just making the assumption that they're not a good staff, but quite often, more often than not, it could just be the tiniest little thing that could have been resolved.
Right. Okay, so I think this segues well into the next question, and that is I deal with a lot of people, and a lot of my clients are people that are starting business online, and their first attempt at outsourcing, they post a job up on Upwork or Elance or whatever, or a Craigslist. They hire someone, and they fail miserably at it.
Yeah.
And there's probably more of those stories out there than success stories in the world of outsourcing. So what are the mistakes that you see people making on a day-to-day basis, and how do you avoid them?
Yeah. So, it was the exact same experience for me as well. And, with all the research that I've ever done, it's about 70% of people who attempt outsourcing, they fail at it. And, there's a percentage of people who succeed and a percentage of people who are just have a in-between kind of experience. And probably the biggest few reasons I would say is when it comes to putting a task, if you need something done in your business, you've got two ways of looking at it. One is you can think, all right, well, I just need shit done, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the other way of looking at it is I want to build a team. So the ones that I see who are really successful at outsourcing, the ones who do well, are the ones who go into the outsourcing scenario, not with the view of just getting, this one or two few small things done. It's more they have the mindset of building a team. So that's the first thing. And look, that's not always going to be possible because you may just need a website done, or you may just need this one thing. But there are solutions, where you can tap into the structure of a team, which I'll probably mention later, so that you can go into the scenario, so that you've got the processes and the systems of working with a team as opposed to just working with one person, right? Now, the other thing is most of the solutions that are out there, as I mentioned before, what I call do it yourself. So that's where you get connected with a freelancer and it's you versus the freelancer. Mm-hmm. And freelancers want to work for themselves. That's why they're freelancers. They don't want to have any accountability to your business. And if something happens, they don't want to turn up to work today, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't call their mother and, complain about it. So, that's one of the biggest things there. It's you just have to be mindful of who you're dealing with, right? And if you have the expectation that somebody's going to, show up as, being off the bat, a faithful, trustworthy, reliable staff member, then you're in for a shock, right? The other thing, which is probably the biggest thing was for me in the start, and the biggest thing I see where things start to break down, is in the communication. Now, communication is always a two-way street, right? So you're dealing with someone from another country, another culture, another language, and you really need to be super, super mindful and respectful of how you are articulating what you're looking for. And this is where personalities come into it, and all of us have got different skills and abilities and a different way we communicate what we're looking for, right? So some entrepreneurs, they're so big picture, they're just so focused on the long term or the big picture activities, and not really great in the details or the systems of the business, right? So if you go into a scenario looking to get something done, let's use the example of a website, right? You want to get a website built or a sales page done or something like that. If you kind of go into it with very vague and ambiguous instructions, and you're expecting that the person you're dealing with is going to be the one to make it slick. If you kind of say, give them instructions like, I want it to look super nice, or I want it to look slick, or it needs to be fresh, and expect them to understand what's in your mind, it's just never going to happen, right? So you need to show up in such a way that you need to understand you're dealing with a technician who needs details. So you need to be super clear on what your instructions are, have real clarity. We've got training videos and all sorts on how to do these things. How do you give feedback visually? So you can, so that you can really help articulate what you're looking for. Because if you're just trying to explain over, say, Skype or in a text message or in an email, then your communication is going to get lost. And there's a few systems that people really should put in place, like using a project management system like Basecamp or Trello, those kind of things. Where a lot of people go wrong in dealing with virtual assistants and working with teams in general is by using email. I do not believe in sending emails back and forth on a project, because emails can go missing into cyberspace, especially when it's really convenient for someone, right? So,
Yep.
So if it's in a project management system, it's super clear. There's like a chronological order to things. And, some people listening to this are going to understand, these systems like Asana, Basecamp, Trello, and some are not. But that's why if you work with somebody who can kind of guide you on those things or give you access to those systems, it's going to make a huge difference. So look, there's a bunch of different things in there, but look, the biggest learning for me was, in the start, I kept failing, and for 2 years I was kind of like scratching my head, going, this whole outsourcing thing sucks. It's got to work. Why does it work for some people and it doesn't work for others? And it took me 2 years to figure out that I was the common denominator, right? Mm-hmm. I was the reason why it kept falling apart. And then I really started looking at, how am I communicating? How am I articulating my message? How am I thinking? And when I started to take accountability for what I was putting out there and how I was communicating, it just had me be more patient and have me clarify things more and not have the expectations that things at the other end are going to land with them straight away. Because especially in Asia and the Philippines, they like to say yes a lot. They say yes sir, yes ma'am, yes sir, yes ma'am, and you just make the assumption, right, that they understand what you're talking about, and then next thing you know, it's launch day and everything falls apart because they've said yes. So you need to be checking in with them and going, hey, are we on track with that? Send me a screenshot or give me an update on this, and just check everything's on track with the project, because quite often, what they tell you isn't necessarily what you think.
And, when I saw you speak in Australia a few months ago, one of the things you said, it's stuck in my head, and it was, people try and outsource outcomes. And I'm trying to remember exactly how you phrased it, but it just went, I went, yeah, that makes sense. People getting started, and you kind of said this, I think, when you first started talking about mistakes, is people go into this process and they think, hey, I need a website. And so they get out there and they say, hey, contractor, I need a website for my fishing blog. And they expect that an outcome is going to be created. Now, from your perspective, is it possible to hire ever to get a good outcome, or are you always going to have to design the outcome yourself and then outsource the process to create the outcome?
Yeah. So, really great point. And look, because we're on audio, probably what I could do is give an analogy, right? So the analogy that I use is, it's kind of like if you want to build a house, right? You've kind of got this vision in your mind of what your house what you want it to look like. And you cannot take that vision and go to the bricklayer and say, hey, Mr. Bricklayer, I want you to build me this house, right? And that's how people kind of approach their outsourcing. It's like you've got the outcome, there's vision in mind, you want something created, but you don't know what are all the pieces of that, right? Mm-hmm. So what needs to happen is the architecture. So if you want to build a house, you need to go to an architect, and the architect says, all right, we need a plumber, we need an electrician, we need the bricklayer, we need to build the roof, we need all these different elements. And then that is the blueprint for what the technician would be doing, what the bricklayer will be doing. So they have very clear instructions, right? So when it comes to building a website, or another one that comes to us all the time is social media. So people come to us and say, hey, we need our social media done. We want to generate leads from social media. And we say, okay, what's your strategy, sir, ma'am? They're like, we don't have one. That's why we came to you. So And then the way we say it is, look, we can plug in a virtual assistant to work with you, but they are not the strategists. They are not necessarily the architects. They can do a little bit of it, but it's more important that they're guided, like they've got as much information up front as possible. So if you go into the scenario working with a virtual assistant, not being super clear on, if it's a website, what are all the colors? What do you need it to look like? Where does everything go? And if you don't have that, then there's just going to be so much back and forth because they're not mind readers. And that's where it starts to become frustrating because there's going to be so much back and forth, right? And what could be, say, a 20-hour task could end up being 80 hours just because of the revisions, the back and forth, right? So it actually works in your favor to really create what is that structure in between, or that architecture, or the strategy part of it, and get that right. Now, the thing for me is, I have a team, right? So if I want something done in my marketing, then I consult with my marketing team, and then someone takes that and then puts that in the system, and project managers working with the team. And I'm guessing you kind of do much the same. If somebody is not in that position where they have a team already, is it possible to work with a virtual assistant in that regard? It can be. However, you need to have the mindset of being the project manager. So somebody in the equation needs to be the project manager. And if you don't have that project manager, then you need to kind of take accountability and think like the project manager. Meaning, when it comes to giving instructions or the back and forth, you need to kind of think through, all right, well, what's the technician, the person building it, how is it that they should be communicated with? They're not going to understand the outcome that I'm giving them, the big picture. They're not going to understand that. So you, as the person who needs the outcome, you need to really make it clear and just have that extra work in between, and don't try and shortcut it. That's probably the biggest thing. You're going to have to do some work in giving the instructions and, laying it out or mapping it out, whatever it is. So is it possible? Yes, it is. Now, when it comes to recruiting a virtual assistant, then what I would say is, if you've got that in mind, then that's probably going to help you in the equation of sourcing and recruiting, because you can probably test them through the process, and you could, maybe give a test instruction and say, okay, here's a little test task. Do you understand what I'm talking about? Before going into the nuts and bolts of a big project, maybe do a small snippet of a test to kind of test the relationship and test how you communicate together. And that would be, the deciding factor. Because once you're in the middle of it, it's kind of too hard to go back, right?
Yeah.
And then it's like, now I need to bring somebody else in, and now I need to bring somebody else in and take over. It's like, that's the worst thing that can happen.
Yeah, and it's a horror story I hear all the time.
Yeah.
It's funny. I mean, if I had to summarize, the key message here is it's communication, and how you communicate and what you communicate and how thoroughly you communicate. And I made the mistake initially, and I think it's the most common mistake is not giving the detail needed and not being willing. Here's what it is. People aren't willing to put in the work up front that's required to give their contractors the information they need to be successful in their task. And so, personally, whenever I go in to do a website, you'll do a full wireframe of it, right? Put all the content in, where it's all going to go, have notes on all of it. Does that take time? Yeah, absolutely. But when that light came on for me, all of a sudden I went from a low success rate to a massively high success rate with my outsourcing for, say, website design, right? So, it's a mindset shift for people, because I think too many people run at outsourcing thinking it's this holy grail of efficiency, low cost, get it done fast without having to do any thinking on their own.
Yeah, it's not a magic bullet. And the way I explain it is, it's like, if you need to put something together like a website or something like that, right? If you can set your business or the activities in your business so that you can clear some stuff off your plate, which I define as being low value activities, so that you've got a little bit more time to focus on more high value activities, then that's all you really need to do. If you're just replacing even like the smallest amount of time of low value activities with high value activities because you're able to outsource this one thing or these two things, then that's the aim of the game. And then it's just a cycle of continuing to clear your plate with low value, of low value, and fill it with high value. And if you think of somebody like Richard Branson, that's all he's ever done, right? It's like the cycle is, in the start, it's like you really working in the nuts and bolts of the business. And yes, you've got to put time and effort into things. But if you can just clear your plate of some low value activities, fill it with high value, and you just do that over and over and over and over, then eventually you end up in a position like you or I are, Derek, where we've actually got project managers in place and we've got strategists on the team that we can consult with. And, a lot of that stuff is kind of handled for us. And someone like Richard Branson, that's all he's ever done, continue to do that, and you're left with nothing but, lying in your hammock with a cocktail.
on one of your private islands.
Yeah.
Sounds good. Okay, so now there's certain things that can be outsourced. There's certain things that probably shouldn't be outsourced. Let's get to some specifics there. What are the common things that people can successfully outsource? What should you never or probably not outsource?
Yeah. So, look, anything to do with website design, graphic design, product creation, all that kind of thing. So, like a big part of what we do at ezyVA is, we're working with people probably in the back end of their marketing, right? That's, a big portion of what we do, and it's one of the bigger things that you can outsource out there, right? Using whatever platform. So anything to do with websites, membership sites, your video marketing. So editing videos, creating explainer videos. If you want to write an ebook, like you just type it up on Microsoft Word, and you give them, an idea of how you might want it to be laid out, and someone can make it, format it and make it look really pretty and put a cover on it and stuff like that, right? So, stuff like that I've never been good at, and I never want to be good at. I could spend 2 days, trying to format an ebook to make it look pretty, and it would take somebody in my team 1 hour, to do that kind of stuff. So anything to do with the marketing collateral, we'll call it. One thing to, I guess, avoid in that space is probably, or to be mindful of, is copywriting. So copywriting is very difficult to do because anything that's subjective, right? Anything that or might be related to your IP or to your product or your service, if someone's not part of your business, then they're not going to understand the logic of how something should be written. Or copywriting is a difficult one, especially out of the Philippines. So I mean, I've got a few people out of Romania that I use now, but I found it very difficult to do out of the Philippines, and I would guide people to be careful about copywriting, definitely.
Okay. Now what about customer service and support, stuff like that?
Yeah. So look, there's two ways of thinking about outsourcing, right? Now, one is there's project-based or ad hoc work, and that's what I'm talking about there with websites or graphic design. If you need a new Facebook banner or something like that, right? You need that now, and that's a one-off task. But you don't need that next week. You don't need any regularity to that. So that's project-based ad hoc stuff that you just kind of need on demand, right? And then the other side of outsourcing is process-based. So anything where there's a daily activity or a weekly activity or a monthly activity, then that requires that should be handled a different way. So that's where you would recruit somebody, how I describe as being a dedicated virtual assistant. So that's where somebody would work for you for set hours, say every day, and they might work for you for 2 hours a day or 4 hours a day or 8 hours a day. So anything to do with social media, helping you as a personal assistant, like with your emails, calendar management, any specific processes that are based inside your business, anything that requires somebody to be online every day, like customer service, then that really requires you to go down that route of hiring somebody to be part of your business, and you give them set conditions and they work for you for set hours. You would never approach customer service as a project-based thing. Mm-hmm. So customer service, definitely over the phone, emails, etc. Now that kind of thing does require training. People need to know that there's going to be a level of training in that, of course. But yeah, definitely that stuff is easily outsourced.
And now, when it comes to training, how do you effectively train somebody on the other side of the planet?
Yeah, so we do look. I've got a video that I could probably share with everybody, and it's a training video on how to do training videos, right? So it's just showing people really how to use screencasting. So a system like Camtasia or Snagit. There's some complicated ones, and Camtasia's probably a more complex program, and then there's cheap or free ones, like there's one called Jing, and it allows you to record 5-minute videos, and all you kind of do is you just go through the process yourself on your computer and you talk through it, and you move your mouse around and you point out arrows here, and that's the most effective way of training, because then somebody's got like a documented record, a video they can pull up anytime. So look, if you've gone to if you've bought a software program before or something, normally there's a tutorial video on how to use it. So it's kind of creating the same thing, and it's super simple to do. Like, it's really not hard. Anybody could do it. Like, if I could do it, a monkey could do it. So when it comes to training, the easiest way, hands down, is just to do short training videos, and all you've got to do is kind of go through the process yourself and just record what you're doing and talk through it, because then you've got a visual means and then you've got an audio means, and people are understanding you from different mediums. Whereas if you just try and explain something on text, they don't have the visual reference to understand what you're trying to explain. So if you can talk through something and show them at the same time, and you can do that live. You can do screen sharing just on Skype. You can share your screen, but I would recommend recording what you're doing. There's systems like TeamViewer. TeamViewer is one where people you can access their computer or they can access your computer. There's a number of systems out there, but definitely the video means is hands down the best way.
Yeah, and something to add to that too, because that's how I do it. Camtasia or Snagit or Jing or whatever we need to use. Once you create those videos as well, you now have a library of training videos. So in the future, you keep those videos. Onboarding, training new staff becomes a lot faster and more efficient. So I think people grumble and groan the first time. Oh, I don't have time to create these training videos, but it's an asset to your company, because once they're there, and you can continue to train. Now, the one more question about what you can outsource. Let's talk about marketing functions and such. So whether it be social media, email marketing, SEO, what is the success rate with those kind of things?
Yeah, so look, again, it comes down to the strategy in between. What are they being guided by? So if you go into the scenario of social media and look, we can recruit people who have some experience, who could put together a plan for you, right? But I would never rely on that solely. I'm a big believer in consulting with somebody who I know is an expert. Create what is the blueprint, and then same with SEO, right? There's that many people out there who think they know about SEO and what they're doing with SEO, and SEO to me is just a minefield. So if you expect somebody from the Philippines to be an expert in it, then I would say you're not going to get a result, right? So where you would get a result is if you really have the structure of that mapped out. What are the activities? And there are companies out there who only do SEO. So if you want SEO done, then I wouldn't recommend going to just a virtual assistant who says that they can do SEO and expect a result. Somewhere in between, there needs to be an expert strategy. So there's people out there teaching SEO, and if they're learning from you, Derek, or whatever, then that's awesome, because if they've got the structure there in between of what are the actual marketing activities, what is the step 1, 2, 3 for the virtual assistant to do, then that's where the success happens.
Right. Okay, good. So last question here is surrounding outsourcing models. Now, we've got our traditional, Elance, Fiverr, Odesk model. We've got the ability to go out and hire people directly. I could go to the Philippines, post a classified ad on Craigslist, hire somebody directly, or we have basically the solutions you provide, which is kind of almost a managed team there. So talk us through the pros and cons of these different platforms.
Yeah, sure. So, I kind of referred before as what I call do-it-yourself models, and that's the Upwork, Elance, Fiverr, and that's where it's you and the freelancer, and there's nothing in between, right? Now, the pros of that are that it's very easy to get access to them. These platforms are awesome. There's a lot of contractors out there. Like Upwork has millions and millions of contractors on there, and there's not much you can't. There's not much you couldn't find somebody to do for you these days. And it can be very cost effective, right? But I will say that, like anything, you get what you pay for in this world. If you want a virtual assistant for $3 an hour or $4 an hour, you're going to get what you pay for.
Yes.
So there's the do-it-yourself model, and then there's so that's where you get connected with a freelancer. Then there's agencies in between, like there's companies in the Philippines or India or wherever they are, even in locally in Australia or North America, and that's where they would do the recruiting for you, right? So you kind of go to them and say, hey, this is what I'm looking for, and they help you source somebody. And they charge you a fee for finding the right person for you. You agree, I'm going to take this person. But still, again, you work directly with the staff. You pay them. You pay them directly, right? And it's not hard to pay them. It's not a difficult thing. But on those two models, I still call it do it yourself, because it's you with the staff, and there's nobody there in between to help you. So. Look, there are the pros of those are that it's easy to pay. Like you can pay somebody via PayPal, and in Australia we have we've got to pay payroll tax and superannuation, and you guys have got the same thing over there. So it can cut that out and make it the payment side of it really, really easy. You don't have to worry about staff and getting sued for your staff falling down the stairs and stuff like that, right? So it can cut out a lot of that stuff, which is cool. But the biggest negative to the whole thing, I believe, and is that you don't have anybody there helping you, right? So then there's what I call co-managed solutions, and the co-managed solutions is like ezyVA. That's what we do, and how that works is our big point of difference is that we have a company in the Philippines. We have offices over there, and all the staff are actually employees of the company in the Philippines. So what that means is when they're onboarded, they don't have the freelancer mindset, so they're not going to go missing. right? So if there's rules that they need to adhere to, and they come in looking for a long-term opportunity, whereas freelancers, they tend to be looking over the fence all the time. If they get offered a job where they're going to get paid 20 cents an hour more, they're likely to take it, right? So our whole structure is we want to be able to nurture a long-term relationship, which I believe is the success in what makes successful outsourcing, is finding somebody and working with somebody that you can have be part of your business and be part of your team, right? So having that structure allows us to do that. Every staff that we put in place, they have a team leader, and that team leader's job is to be the conduit between the staff and the client. So when communication challenges do arise, you as the client, you have a sounding board. Like, you have somebody that you can go to straight away and say, hey, can you help me with this? This happened. Or, hey, we want to do better in this. We want to set a new system. So there's always a support mechanism there for you, right? So the way I kind of explain it is it's kind of like you're parachuting into the structure of a bigger team. So you're going into the scenario with the mindset already of working with a team. So that kind of gives you a different mindset as well. It holds you accountable for making it work, because I see a lot of people giving up on outsourcing prematurely, when if they just stuck it out and kind of pushed through some barriers and did some learning for themselves, they would end up with a result. But if you give up too soon, then of course you're going to get no result. So yeah, that's what I call the co-managed solution. And then there's companies out there that do more managed solutions, and that's probably more so for bigger companies, probably of 20 staff plus, and that's where you can recruit a team. So you would start with a team of 5 staff, and that would include the management. So that may or may not be relevant, but yeah, there's kind of three levels there. And when it comes to things like Fiverr, like even from time to time, I still use Fiverr because there's things that I can get done on there that my team don't do, as an example. And I think Fiverr is a pretty great way for people to start and test the waters, because the most you got to risk is $5, right?
Yeah.
So I kind of like Fiverr for that reason, but if you're going to go into a solution where you're going to have to spend hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars, then that's where you probably need to be a little bit mindful and selective about which way you go.
Now, I've been listening to you here, and I mean, I started outsourcing a very, very long time ago. And actually, first, let me ask this question: what is the sort of the price variance between hiring somebody directly versus using a co-managed model like yourself? Obviously, you have more costs in there. You're a business, so it's going to be slightly higher. What kind of margin difference are we looking at?
Yeah. So yeah, good question. So again, you get what you pay for in this world. And look, if you were going to go to, say, Upwork, and let's just say we were going to find somebody who was a virtual assistant / marketing assistant, right? And let's say they were going to help you with your social media, your email marketing, maybe do a little bit of graphic design, something in that world, right? So you could find somebody probably on Upwork for $3 an hour, right? I would recommend you don't do that.
No.
Right?
You could find somebody, but they're not going to do the job successfully.
Yeah. You could find someone on Upwork who's someone who's going to be, it's going to be good. Is going to be somewhere probably, $6 to $8 an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
Probably up to 10. And I just know that if the more that you spend, the better productivity you're going to get anyway, right? So it's not like if you spend $5 compared to $10, you're probably going to get 3-4 times the output out of someone at $10 an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's probably the biggest thing. So don't consider it like, oh, here's the dollar amount coming out of my pocket. Think of it more like, what's the return on investment for me?
Yeah.
So when it comes to the difference between what you're paying with co-managed, it's probably not that different. Now the reason being is because if somebody is of really high quality on Upwork or Elance or Odesk or whatever they call themselves these days, then they're going to demand a higher rate. And because they're going direct to the market, the reason that they're freelancers is because they've got the ability, they've got the platform where they can charge a higher rate. So they're probably going to be asking $8 or $10 an hour, right? Whereas with us, they're inside our structure where they're in our company for different reasons. A, because they get a regular paycheck, they don't have to worry about things. We've got training, we've got performance mechanisms. So we pay their health benefits. We pay them 13th month, which is like a bonus month. So they're in our company for different reasons, right? So they don't want the whole, risk factor where they can make maybe $10 an hour, but maybe not have a job for half the year, which is what happens. So we tend to attract really high quality people, right? But we can get them at something of a middle kind of rate because we want to pay them well enough, but not cheap. You know what I mean? So probably if there's actually a dollar difference on it, you probably be paying about $2 an hour more with a co-managed service.
So now the reason I asked you that question is because, I've been down this road, and to everybody listening here, it's easy to, first of all, it's easy to get sucked in on the Upwork, to go in there and say, wow, look, $4 an hour, I can save $6 an hour, $5, I can save $5 an hour over co-managed. Now, had a co-managed system like what you have existed when I first started, and I knew then what I know now, it would be no question whatsoever as to which way to go if I'm really looking to build something here. Because if I'm going to spend a couple dollars more, I'm going to get a project manager, which is, the value in that is huge. The reliability of having somebody else worry about making sure their internet works, making sure their computers work, and it's huge. And so, when I look at the margin that you guys are charging, honestly, over and above what I would hire somebody directly for, it's an incredible deal to have all that value-added service, the project management, the team that's already recruited for me. So it's hard to emphasize the additional value you guys are creating there to people that have never been through this process themselves.
And that's
right?
That's the hard part, is because you and I get it, right? But if people haven't been through the pain, then they don't necessarily see the value. And that's cool, because I'm happy for people to go and learn and then come back to us later, right? Which happens all the time. But with the Dream Team, might be a good time to bring up the Dream Team, right? So we have a service, what we call the ezyVA Dream Team, and that's where people can tap into an on-demand service, right? So that's where how that works is you buy a block of 40 hours as credits, and it's around about 10 US an hour, 10.50 US an hour, right? And for that, what we give you is you get one point of contact, and that one point of contact is a project manager. So if you have, say, 3 different tasks on the go, you don't need to figure out who the 3 people are that you're going to go to. You just go to your project manager, you give them the task, they then farm it out, and then there's a quality assessment in between. And we have protocols in place for communication so that if you put a task in the system, you get a message back within 3 hours. So it's not always the case that you're going to get the task back straight away, but you always get communicated with, right? So that's the biggest thing. And so you can put in whatever task you want into the system. And the other thing that we give people access to is everything's done on the project management system, right? So, and you can actually use this project management system in your own business, and you could plug in, say, your business partner or whatever, right? So we actually give you the systems and the framework to work with the team, and that alone can help you to no end to really systemize your business. So. The other thing we do is training. So we give you all the training videos on how to use the project management system. The training video on the training videos, and there's always somebody that you can talk to on a business level as well, because we probably come from a similar space, to you, Derek, and everybody listening to this, in terms of understanding what they're going through in their business. So we can talk to them, as business owners as well to say, hey, why don't we try this? Or, this is going to work and this is not going to work. So there's a lot of that up front as well. We do the strategy with people up front, and make sure that they're going into the right solution and the right scenario. And there's always someone there they can talk to.
And what I find really cool about this dream team as well is, let's say it's an incredible model, and if I was a business just starting out, so I just want everybody listening to truly understand where the value exists here. If I was just starting out, I might need a short video edited. I may need a VA to do some stuff for me. I might need a web designer. I might need somebody to code some stuff on a website. Now, if I was going to outsource that on my own, I have to go out and find 4 different people to outsource that to. And those are going to be individual contracts. They're not going to ever learn my business. They're going to just... So it's tough as a small business to work with a cohesive team. And then the other mistake I see people make all the time is they go, I need help. So they run out and they hire a VA full-time without really thinking through, how am I going to keep this person busy? They had an immediate need and maybe they kept them busy for a week, but then all of a sudden there's this stress, this added stress of, oh my goodness, how do I keep this person busy? Because, now I have a person to manage. So what I love about what you guys have done with that dream team there is, now as a small business who doesn't need a full-time designer, a full-time writer, or a full-time whatever, I can go in there and I can have one point of contact to do all of those things. And it's elastic. It scales as I need it. So that's again, we've been through the school of hard knocks here, and I'm just trying to emphasize how cool what you've created is and how powerful it is, because I know people are going to go out there and they're going to post a job on Upwork and they go, but look, I can get that guy for $4 an hour. And, ezyVA's, $11 an hour or whatever it turns out to be. It's like, guys, you don't understand, right? Yeah.
Another way of explaining it, I guess, is, one thing I always point out is understanding what you're worth. Right. So anybody who's on this call is if I ask them when I'm speaking, I would say, how much are you worth? And everyone's going to put their hand up and say $100 an hour, $200 an hour, $250 an hour, $50 an hour, whatever it is. Right. It's never $10 an hour or $20 an hour. Right. So if your time is consumed doing menial things that you could have somebody else do for $10 an hour, or even $20 an hour, then that should be the gauge on, that should be the discerning factor on, which way you go, right? So as you pointed out before, if you've got 4 different tasks, you could spend probably, let's say you had a 10-hour task needed to be done, you could spend 5 to 10 hours of your own time trying to figure out who's going to do that. And then you're going to have all the communication challenges, and that is time consuming, right? So place a value on your time. If you can cut out that time, if you say you're worth $100 an hour and you can get some of that time back by plugging into a team or working with somebody that's going to cost you even $50 an hour or $20 an hour, $10 especially, then that's going to help you to place a higher value on yourself, and that's how you make more money in your business.
Yeah, and I think that's the key question for people too, is what is my time worth, and that's the deciding factor, right? If somebody else can do this while I'm earning more money, and it makes more sense, right? So, very, very powerful question to ask while you're making this decision. And it's funny, for everybody listening, I didn't want everybody to think this is a big sort of pitch fest for ezyVA. I'm just trying to really communicate the value of what you guys have created here, because I'm so tired of watching people go through this process. And it's funny, you said, oh, you kind of like people to have to go through that process and learn the hard way. And I kind of feel it's my job to try and help people skip that hard way, right? Yeah. And so that's why I'm just like, guys, this is freaking awesome. For a few bucks more to have I pay a project manager full time to work for me. So, and it costs me a lot because he's a local guy to manage my teams over there. Had you existed before I went down this road, my life would look very different. So you could have gotten on that a little sooner for me. But nonetheless, it's a fantastic solution. And that being said, we're as we're running out of time here. In fact, I think we've already way overshot, and that's cool because I think we've given a lot of great information. You've been very generous with that. Where can people find out more about you? Yeah, and about your book. I mean, you've just launched this book, and we talked about mindset in the beginning. I think that's key to understand the mindset, to understand how to go about this process. So tell me about the book. Where can people find the book?
Yeah, so maybe if we can send people to a link, but there's a people can find information about me if they want to find more info on the book, and that's Monty, MONTYG. And then Hooke, HOOKE. So that's Monty G. Hooke. That's montyghook.com. So people can find more info about me. There's links there to ezyVA. There's links there to the book as well. If people want to find out more information directly about ezyVA, that's ezyVA.com. And the thing that I would definitely encourage people to do, I guess, is to go over the website. There's a lot of resources there. I'm really into educating people and training people, and helping people to really work out exactly how to go about outsourcing, and then give them access to tools and resources and hacks that are going to help people as well. And before we go into any kind of scenario with taking somebody on board as a client with ezyVA, we go through a process, what we call the Outsourcing Mastery Consult. And one of the things I talk about in the book, which I would encourage people to do, regardless, if outsourcing is something you want to investigate, building your business is something you want to investigate, there's a really cool exercise which I talk about in the book, and then you'll get access. If you get the book, you'll get access to a training video as well. It's what I call the unpacking, right? And the unpacking is going through a process of deconstructing your business. So working out what are all the individual activities in your business. So if you can go through this process, it gives you real clarity on what's happening in your business. Because if you want to scale up and you want to plug people into it, you need to know what's happening inside your business. And this process of unpacking can really help people get some real clarity on what are all those activities. And then from that, you kind of spit out this list of what's the top 10% or the top 20% of things that maybe I could outsource and get started on right now. And then we do the consult with people from the unpacking. And then, that really can make sure that sets you up for the right, going in the right direction. And if it's not ezyVA, we're more than happy to have the conversation with you, and we'll say, look, maybe you should try this, or maybe you should try that, or maybe prepare this first. We want to be able to point people out in the right direction, regardless of whether they're ready now or not. Because if I can add value to somebody and they come back to us in a year, then that's a good outcome for me.
Absolutely. And just to be clear, you deal with clients all over the world. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. So look, 60% of our clients are in Australia, but then we've got clients in Canada, USA. We've even got them in Bahamas, Singapore, South Africa, all over the world.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I will include all of those links in the show notes. So for everybody listening, if you head over to entrepreneurignited.com and you'll find this episode on the podcast page, you will find all the links that were referred to in this episode, all the tools that were referred to, and a link to Monty's website, a link to his book. And I would highly encourage you to check that out. If outsourcing is something you've never considered, definitely check it out. If it's something you've tried and have not had a great experience with, I would encourage you not to give up on it, because it changed my life. I used to have I used to have an office. I used to have 100 employees. And when I sold that company, I made a commitment, and that was to start enjoying life and enjoying that digital lifestyle, being able to sort of work wherever I am. It's cool. I just got back from 3 weeks in Whistler, where I was mountain biking every day. I had my virtual teams doing everything, and it's a fantastic way to run a business. But you need the right strategies and the right team behind you. And Monty, I think you've nailed it. You've created a system that takes a lot of the guesswork out of it, that takes a lot of the obstacles that were causing failure. So for kudos to you for that. I'm pissed off you didn't have it sooner. But nonetheless, I'm glad it's there now. And again, thanks for your generosity sharing on this interview. Whether somebody uses ezyVA or not, the strategies that you shared today are the key to outsourcing virtually anywhere. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, thank you very much for having me. Awesome to share.
Fantastic. All right. Thank you very much, everybody, for being here. As I said below, you'll find all of the links in the show notes on the website. And to make sure you never miss another episode, head over to entrepreneurignited.com. Make sure you're subscribed or subscribe on iTunes. And we will make sure you're up to date with all our upcoming episodes. Thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you in the next episode.
You're listening to the Entrepreneur Ignited podcast, where we aim to simplify online business so you can make more money.